Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ranking Member, and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. I, too, had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to go visit Guantanamo, and, of course, I've had, in a previous life, some trips over to various vacation spots, being in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think one of the things that we have to come to grips with, and what causes us so much consternation, is really to understand, are we dealing with criminals or are we dealing with enemy combatants? And if we're dealing with enemy combatants, are they legal or illegal enemy combatants? And so I'd like to ask a series of questions. The gentleman who shot our 4 airmen, killing 2 of those airmen in Frankfurt, Germany, do you consider that a criminal or an enemy combatant?
Congressman, I hesitate to comment on a particular case. I will say this, that the first thing I'd ask myself is this person part of the congressionally declared enemy in the congressionally declared armed conflict? That's the question I think we have to ask. If the person who commits a violent act against our military is part of al-Qaeda or an associated force, then that's something that may well be a matter for our military versus law enforcement. But, you know, you can't, it's hard to generalize here.
Well, see, I think one of the problems is if you go back and you look at World War II, I mean, in World War II, we did not go to fight the 12th Panzer Battalion or the 55th Japanese Infantry Regiment. So, I mean, we're going to see more of these instances where our men and women in uniform are being attacked. And I think that one of the critical things that we have to get to in this nation is really defining this enemy and defining the battlefield so we don't have these moments of indecision. I look at what just happened recently with the Somali pirates. I mean, we have 13, I believe 15 of them that we have now brought to the Norfolk courthouse for doing something where they basically commandeered a U.S. flagged vessel, being a civilian vessel, and executed 4 Americans. Now, history will tell me that back in the early 1800s, we had something similar of that happening, and we sent the Marines. Do you believe that these Somali pirates should be entered into our U.S. civilian court system, or should they be brought down to Guantanamo Bay?
Guantanamo Bay is intended for enemy combatants, the enemy being the congressionally declared enemy. I think we have to be careful, and I'm sure you appreciate this, we have to be careful about the slippery slope. Not every action of our government against a bad person or even a terrorist should necessarily be a military action. We have to be careful not to over-militarize our approach to acts of terrorism. I think there is a place for law enforcement, not necessarily U.S. law enforcement of other well-developed nations. But I think that given this unconventional conflict we're in against a non-state actor, we have to be vigilant not to let the slippery slope creep into our thinking about who our congressionally declared enemy is in this armed conflict. And that's something that I have to assess almost daily in my job.
So if al-Qaeda were tomorrow to change their name to the Bombay Bicycle Boys Club, would they not be a congressionally termed enemy? I mean, would we treat them different?
If they change their name, hopefully our intelligence will be able to figure that out, and we would realize it's still al-Qaeda.
I think the most important thing that we have to do is to not constrain ourselves and understanding this modern 21st century battlefield, and it's only this named enemy or that named enemy, because what is Hamas? And of course, before there was al-Qaeda, the #1 terrorist organization that killed the most amount of Americans was Hezbollah. So do we not see Hezbollah as an enemy force? I'll finish up on this last question. 24 years of age, Omar Khadr, who is guilty of 5 war crimes, to include killing a U.S. serviceman, will be released out of Guantanamo Bay next year and sent back to his native country of Canada. What was the genesis of coming forth with this ideal, and how this deal, and how can you explain that to the parents of that American serviceman who was killed?
That was an arrangement reached between the prosecutors, the defense counsel, ultimately endorsed by the convening authority. As General Counsel of the Department of Defense, I don't make prosecution judgments or plea arrangements, and I'm not supposed to. I'm satisfied that the parties collectively did what they needed to do. And I also know that the victim's family was consulted throughout the process.
Well, I know that we talked about credibility, and I think the most important credibility we must maintain is the credibility we have with our men and women in uniform.